The ancient ceremonial hall buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from across the galaxy gathered for the most important event in interspecies relations. Dr. Beth Williams adjusted her simple black blazer and checked the small pet carrier beside her chair one more time. Through the mesh window, she could see orange fur and hear the soft rumbling of contentment. Around her, the atmosphere grew thick with tension and barely contained fear. The Krillian delegation had positioned themselves near the massive reinforced platform at the center of the hall, their steel-blue skin gleaming under the artificial lights. Behind them, secured in a containment field that hummed with barely controlled energy, their razor wing paced restlessly. The creature stood 12 feet tall, its metallic claws scraping against the energy barrier with sounds like grinding metal. Every few seconds, it would spread wings that could span a small spacecraft, revealing the razor-sharp metallic feathers that had given it its name. The Voltani representatives sat in perfect meditation poses, their pale, elongated forms motionless except for the subtle glow that pulsed beneath their translucent skin. Their Mind Reaper loomed behind them like a living shadow, its form shifting between solid matter and something that hurt to look at directly. Several smaller species had already moved their seats farther away, unwilling to risk prolonged exposure to its psychic emanations. The air around the Mind Reaper seemed to shimmer with malevolent intelligence, and even the bravest warriors among the assembled delegates avoided making eye contact with IT. In the crystalline section reserved for silicon-based life forms, the Shardfolk delegation sparkled like living gemstones. Their representative, a being that looked like someone had carved a person from pure diamond, gestured gracefully toward their contribution to the ceremony. The crystal hunter defied easy description, appearing as a constantly shifting geometric pattern that somehow suggested predatory intent. It could phase through solid matter at will, making it nearly impossible to contain or defend against. The creature existed partially outside normal space, giving it an otherworldly presence that made even the most advanced sensor struggle to maintain a lock on its position. Dr. Williams had studied the files on every species present. This ceremony had been conducted for thousands of years, serving as both a diplomatic tradition and a practical demonstration of power. Each species presented their homeworld's apex predator, establishing their position in the complex hierarchy that governed galactic politics. Those with the most fearsome predators commanded respect, gained favorable trade agreements, and secured the best territories for colonization. Those with lesser threats found themselves relegated to subordinate roles, forever dependent on the protection and goodwill of their more dangerous neighbors. The Krillian ambassador, a scarred veteran whose missing left arm testified to his species' violent culture, cast a dismissive glance toward the human section. His voice carried clearly across the hall as he spoke to his aide in their harsh, grinding language. The translator device rendered his words into standard galactic. Look at the mammals, bringing their pet in a cage. They barely understand what this ceremony means. Other species murmured agreement. Humanity had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel and had been granted observer status in the Galactic Council just 3 years ago. Most delegates viewed them as a curiosity at best, a potential liability at worst. Their homeworld descriptions spoke of a relatively peaceful planet with modest predators, nothing that could compare to the legendary creatures that had shaped the evolution and culture of the galaxy's dominant civilizations. The ceremonial drums began their ancient rhythm, signaling the start of the presentations. The Voltani went first, as tradition demanded. Their delegate rose smoothly and gestured toward the Mind Reaper. The creature's form solidified slightly, revealing something vaguely humanoid but wrong in ways that made primitive fear scream in the minds of everyone present. With casual ease, it projected waves of terror so intense that several delegates had to be escorted from the hall. The demonstration drone released for testing crumpled in on itself, not from physical damage but from the complete breakdown of its AI systems when exposed to the Mind Reaper's psychic assault. The Krillians followed with their own display of raw power. The razor wing emerged from its containment field like a metallic hurricane. It moved with the fluid grace of something born to kill, every motion efficient and deadly. When the test targets were released, the creature demonstrated why the Krillian Empire controlled 17 star systems. Its claws sheared through military-grade armor like paper, while its razor feathers could be launched with enough force to penetrate starship hulls. The razor wing completed its demonstration by casually tearing apart a decommissioned fighter craft, reducing tons of advanced technology to scrap metal in under 30 seconds. Species after species presented their champions. Acid-spitting venom WRMS, pack-hunting phase stalkers, reality-warping void touch creatures that existed partially outside normal space-time. Each demonstration was more impressive than the last, and the implicit message grew clearer with every presentation. These were civilizations forged by surviving alongside creatures that could end worlds. Dr. Williams listened to the appreciative murmurs and ceremonial cheers that followed each display. She had spent months preparing for this moment, studying not just the ceremony itself, but the psychology behind it. Humanity needed to establish itself as more than just another minor species clinging to the edges of galactic civilization. Too much depended on getting this right. When the final traditional presentation concluded, the ceremonial leader announced the newcomers. Several recently discovered species presented creatures that, while impressive by their standards, paled in comparison to the established powers. A few delegates had already begun gathering their things, clearly considering the interesting portion of the ceremony complete. Then came humanity's turn. Dr. Beth Williams rose from her seat with quiet confidence, lifting the pet carrier with both hands. The ceremonial hall fell silent, except for the distant humming of life support systems and the occasional rustle of movement from the various alien delegations. She walked across the polished floor toward the central platform, her footsteps echoing in the vast space. The carrier weighed almost nothing compared to the massive containment systems the other species had required for their apex predators. As she reached the platform, she could feel hundreds of eyes watching her every movement. Some observers leaned forward with curiosity, while others exchanged glances that clearly questioned humanity's sanity in participating in such an ancient and dangerous tradition. Beth set the carrier down gently and knelt beside it. Through the mesh door, she could see Whiskers stretched out in his favorite position, paws tucked under his chest, eyes half closed in that relaxed state that cats seem to master better than any other creature in the universe. His orange and white fur was perfectly groomed, and his pink nose twitched slightly as he processed the unfamiliar scents filling the air. "Hello, beautiful," she whispered, unlatching the carrier door. "Ready to meet some new friends?" Whiskers emerged with the unhurried grace that only cats possessed. He stepped onto the platform and immediately began what every cat owner in the galaxy would recognize as the inspection routine. First, he sniffed the air thoroughly, his sensitive nose cataloging every scent in the enormous hall. Then he sat down and began grooming himself, licking his paw and running it over his ears with meticulous attention to detail. The silence stretched for several long moments. Then the Voltani delegates' musical laughter broke the quiet like crystal chimes in a gentle breeze. The sound triggered a cascade of reactions throughout the hall. The Krillian ambassador's scarred face twisted into what might have been amusement or disgust. Several of the smaller species began chittering among themselves in their various languages. "Honored human delegate," the Voltani representative said, rising gracefully from their meditation pose. "Perhaps there has been a translation error. This creature appears to be a domesticated companion animal, not an apex predator. Surely your species has not confused the ceremonial requirements." The Mind Reaper behind the Voltani delegate shifted its form, tendrils of psychic energy reaching out to probe the small orange creature that continued grooming itself with complete indifference. The psychic predator paused, its alien intelligence apparently puzzled by what it found. Where it expected to encounter the familiar patterns of prey behavior, instead found something that registered as neither afraid nor aggressive, but somehow entirely unconcerned with its presence. Beth smiled and reached in her jacket pocket, withdrawing a small laser pointer. "I appreciate your concern, but there's no translation error. This is Whiskers, and he is indeed our representative apex predator. Perhaps a demonstration would be helpful." The Krillian ambassador made a sound that their translator struggled to render, finally settling on derisive snort. His good arm gestured toward the massive razor wing, which had settled into a predatory crouch behind its energy barrier. "Young species, your small mammal would not survive 30 seconds against any true predator. The razorwing could swallow it in a single bite." Whiskers finished grooming his left paw and looked directly at the razorwing. For just a moment, something passed between the two creatures. The massive metallic predator, which had been radiating confidence and barely contained violence, took an involuntary step backward. Its head tilted slightly, studying the small orange creature with what might have been confusion. "I understand your skepticism," Beth said, maintaining her calm tone. "Our apex predator does work differently than yours. Rather than demonstrating in the traditional manner, I'd like to request access to the ecosystem simulation chamber. I believe a more comprehensive test would be appropriate for such an unusual case." The ceremonial leader, an ancient being whose species had moderated these ceremonies for millennia, leaned forward with interest. Their compound eyes reflected the hall's lights like scattered stars as they considered the request. The simulation chamber had been used occasionally when traditional demonstrations seemed insufficient, though never for such a small creature. "The simulation chamber has not been activated for this ceremony in over 200 years," the leader said, their voice carrying harmonics that spoke of great age and experience. It was designed to test creatures against complete ecosystems, not to showcase individual combat prowess. Are you certain this is the appropriate venue for your companion? Whiskers had now completed his initial grooming and begun exploring the platform. He approached the edge where the Shardfolk delegation sat, their crystalline forms refracting light into rainbow patterns. The crystal hunter phased slightly, its geometric form becoming less solid as it evaluated this strange new presence. To everyone's surprise, Whiskers showed no fear of the creature that existed partially outside normal space. Instead, he sat down just outside what most beings would consider the crystal hunter's effective range and began grooming his tail. The crystal hunter's form shifted more dramatically, cycling through configurations that had been known to drive lesser minds to madness. Whiskers continued washing his tail with the focused attention that cats brought to all-important tasks. When he finished, he looked directly at the crystal hunter and began what every cat owner would instantly recognize as the slow blink of contentment and confidence. The crystal hunter actually solidified completely, its form becoming more traditionally geometric, as if seeking the stability of normal space when confronted with something it couldn't quite categorize. The Shardfolk delegates leaned back in their seats, their crystalline forms chiming softly with what might have been surprise. "Fascinating," the Shardfolk representative said, their voice like whined through crystal formations. "Your predator shows no fear response to entities existing in altered dimensional states. Most creatures cannot even perceive our hunter clearly, yet yours seems to acknowledge its presence while remaining completely unperturbed." Beth nodded. Cats have evolved alongside humans for thousands of years. They've learned to coexist with many different types of entities and environments. But I think the simulation chamber would provide a much better demonstration of their true capabilities. The ceremonial leader made a decision that would be debated by xenobiologists for generations to come. "Very well. The simulation chamber will be prepared. However, I must warn you that the ecosystem contains predatory species from across the galaxy. Many are significantly larger and more dangerous than your representative. If you wish to withdraw your participation, there would be no shame in acknowledging that your species requires more time to develop." Beth looked down at Whiskers, who had now discovered the fascinating texture of the platform's surface and was testing it with his claws. He looked up at her with bright green eyes that held depths of intelligence that most species consistently underestimated. "Thank you for your concern," she said, "but I think you'll find that Whiskers is more than ready for this challenge." The ecosystem simulation chamber stretched beyond what seemed possible for a space station, its holographic environment creating the illusion of an entire world contained within the massive room. Ancient technology hummed to life, painting reality with light and energy fields that could simulate any environment from across the known galaxy. The chamber's walls disappeared behind layers of generated landscape that rolled away into simulated horizons. Dr. Beth Williams stood beside the observation platform, watching as the chamber's systems created a complex ecosystem that would challenge any predator. Rolling grasslands stretched into dense forests, while rocky outcroppings provided elevated terrain. A river system wound through the landscape, feeding into marshlands that gave way to more open hunting grounds. The environmental controls adjusted humidity, temperature, and even gravity in different zones to accommodate various forms of life. The other delegations arranged themselves along the observation platforms, their apex predators now released into different sections of the vast simulation. The Razorwing had claimed the rocky highlands, its metallic form gleaming as it spread its wings and released a piercing cry that echoed across the artificial landscape. Below, in the marshlands, the Mind Reaper moved through shadows that seemed deeper and darker than they should be, its psychic presence creating ripples of unease that affected even the holographic wildlife. The Crystal Hunter had positioned itself near the forest edge, where solid matter gave way to more chaotic terrain. Its geometric form shifted between phases of reality, making it nearly impossible to track with conventional sensors. Smaller apex predators from other species had established their own territories throughout the ecosystem, each demonstrating the hunting patterns that had shaped their civilizations. Whiskers sat in his carrier at the platform's edge, watching the activity below with the calm attention that cats brought to observing everything around them. His tail twitched occasionally, the only sign that he was processing the complex sensory information from the simulation. Beth had placed a small bowl of water and some treats near the carrier, knowing that comfort and routine were important for cats in unfamiliar environments. The ecosystem population has been established, announced the chamber's computer system in the Universal Translator. Current count: 473 individual creatures representing 37 different species classifications. Biodiversity index optimal for comprehensive testing. The simulated wildlife moved through their artificial environment with programmed behavioral patterns based on real species from across the galaxy. Herds of massive herbivores grazed in the open areas, while smaller prey species darted between cover points. Pack hunters stalked through the forests, and aerial predators circled overhead. The ecosystem was designed to be complex enough to challenge any apex predator while providing multiple hunting opportunities. The established predators immediately began asserting their dominance. The razorwing launched itself from its perch and swept across the grasslands, its razor feathers cutting down several of the larger herbivores in a display of overwhelming power. The other creatures in that section scattered, but many had nowhere to run from something that could attack from the sky with such devastating effect. In the marshlands, the Mind Reaper's hunt was subtler, but no less effective. Creatures would simply stop moving, their minds overwhelmed by psychic pressure that left them paralyzed with terror. The Mind Reaper would then approach its victims with leisurely confidence, feeding on both their fear and their life force. The surrounding wildlife learned quickly to avoid the dark sections where reality seemed slightly wrong. The Crystal Hunter demonstrated the efficiency of a predator that could ignore physical barriers. It phased through solid matter to appear inside the protective formations that prey species had evolved to use for defense. Creatures that thought themselves safe behind rocks or trees would suddenly find their refuge invaded by something that existed partially outside normal space. Population count: 412, the computer reported after the first hour. Biodiversity index declining within expected parameters for apex predator introduction. Beth opened Whisker's carrier and gently lifted him out. He settled comfortably in her arms, purring softly as she scratched behind his ears. The sound was barely audible even in the quiet observation area, a gentle rumble that seemed entirely out of place given the predatory violence unfolding in the simulation below. "Ready to go explore?" she whispered to him. Whiskers looked up at her with bright green eyes, then turned his attention back to the ecosystem chamber. His pupils dilated slightly as his hunting instincts began to engage. Beth carried him to the transport platform that would take them down to the chamber floor. The Krillian ambassador's scarred face showed open disbelief as he watched the human prepare to release their tiny predator into an environment where creatures many times its size were actively hunting. "This borders on animal cruelty," he said, his translator rendering his harsh language into something that sounded almost concerned. "Your creature will be killed within minutes." "Whiskers has been in more dangerous situations than this," Beth replied calmly. "He once got loose in our embassy's ventilation system and spent 3 days hunting the local equivalent of rats before we could catch him. The maintenance staff is still finding small bones in unexpected places." The transport platform descended smoothly into the chamber. As they approached the ecosystem floor, Whiskers began to show more interest in his surroundings. His ears swiveled to track sounds that human hearing couldn't detect, and his nose worked constantly to process the complex scent information from the artificial environment. Beth set him down gently at the edge of a grove of trees that provided good cover and multiple escape routes. "Have fun, sweetie. I'll be watching from upstairs." Whiskers looked around the immediate area with the thorough attention that cats gave to any new territory. He sniffed several trees, tested the ground with his paws, and even sampled the air near a small stream. Then he did what cats have been doing for millions of years when introduced to new hunting grounds. He vanished. 1 moment, He was visible beside the stream, orange and white fur clearly distinguishable against the green vegetation. The next moment, the most advanced sensors in the galaxy lost track of him completely. The observation platforms erupted in confused murmurs as delegates struggled to locate the small predator in the vast ecosystem. Sensor readings? Demanded the ceremonial leader. Unable to maintain target lock, replied the computer. Subject has entered full stealth mode using natural camouflage and behavioral adaptation. The Voltani delegate leaned forward, their elegant form tense with sudden interest. Their Mind Reaper had paused in its hunting, its psychic senses apparently unable to locate the new presence in the ecosystem. Fascinating. Even our hunter cannot sense your predator's location or intentions. Beth smiled as she returned to the observation platform. The hunt has begun. Dr. Beth Williams watched the ecosystem displays with the calm patience of someone who had spent years observing feline behavior. The population counter showed steady declines, but the delegates around her grew increasingly agitated as they struggled to understand what was happening in the simulation below. Their mighty apex predators, creatures that had dominated entire planets, were showing signs of confusion and stress. Population count, 391, the computer announced. Cause of population decline, unknown. No visual confirmation of predatory events. The Krillian ambassador's scarred face showed growing frustration as his razor wing circled the sky above the grasslands, its metallic head swiveling constantly as it searched for threats it could not locate. The massive predator's behavior had shifted from confident dominance to nervous alertness. It would land, test the air with sharp calls, then launch itself back into the sky as if seeking the safety of altitude. Your creature is somehow interfering with our Razorwing's hunting patterns, the Krillian delegate said, his voice carrying an edge of accusation. The wing has not made a successful kill in over 30 minutes. It keeps reacting to threats that our sensors cannot detect. Beth nodded thoughtfully. Cats are ambush predators. They prefer to hunt from concealment, studying their prey before striking. Whiskers is probably still learning about the ecosystem and its inhabitants. The Voltani representative had abandoned their traditional meditation pose, their elongated form tense with concern. Their Mind Reaper had actually retreated to the deepest shadows of the marshland, its psychic emanations more subdued than anyone had ever recorded. Our hunter reports unusual sensations. It detects a presence that feels familiar yet wrong. The psychic signature suggests a predator, but one unlike anything in our databases. Population count, 352, came the next announcement. The rate of decline was accelerating, but still no one could identify the cause. The Crystal Hunter had begun manifesting in fully solid form, abandoning its usual phase-shifting tactics. Its geometric patterns cycled through configurations that suggested deep unease. The Shardfolk delegates' crystalline form chimed with harmonics of confusion as they struggled to interpret their champion's behavior. The hunter reports spatial distortions in its vicinity, the Shardfolk representative said, their voice like whined through crystal caves. Something is manipulating local reality in ways our sciences cannot explain. The hunter feels observed, stalked. Beth opened her tablet and displayed a series of charts that she had prepared specifically for this moment. On Earth, domestic cats kill between 1 and 4 billion birds every year, along with 6 to 22 billion small mammals. This is in addition to their normal diet, which we provide for them. They don't hunt because they're hungry. They hunt because hunting is what they are. The delegates around her fell silent, processing the implications of those numbers. Several billion kills per year from creatures that were fed and cared for by their human companions. The mathematics were staggering when applied to a species that most of them had dismissed as harmless pets. But surely, the Voltani delegates said, their musical voice strained, such numbers refer to very small prey. Insects, perhaps, or tiny creatures that pose no real threat. Population count, 307. Beth switched to a new chart that showed relative sizes. Cats regularly kill prey larger than themselves. They've been documented bringing down creatures up to 3 times their body weight. They're capable of taking birds of prey, young deer, and even smaller predators that threaten their territory. She paused the display on an image that showed hunting statistics from various Earth ecosystems. But the real key to understanding cats as apex predators isn't their individual kills. It's their impact on entire ecosystems. They're what we call a keystone species. Their presence or absence can determine the survival or extinction of dozens of other species in the same environment. The ecosystem display suddenly showed movement near the rocky outcropping where the razorwing had been dominating the high ground. Several large herbivores that had been hiding in the caves below suddenly bolted into the open, running in obvious panic. The razorwing immediately dove toward them, but pulled up short when one of the creatures simply collapsed mid-flight. There was no visible attacker, no obvious cause of death. The creature simply stopped running and fell over. The razorwing landed cautiously nearby, its metallic head tilting as it examined the fallen prey. Then it took several quick steps backward, its wings spreading defensively. For just a moment, the ecosystem's sensors caught a glimpse of orange and white fur disappearing into the shadows beneath an overhang. Then Whiskers was gone again, leaving no trace except another reduction in the population count. Precision killing. Beth explained to the increasingly quiet audience. Cats don't waste energy on dramatic displays of power. They study their prey, learn its patterns, and then execute a perfect attack that conserves energy while ensuring success. A single bite to the neck, severing the spinal cord. Clean, efficient, and nearly instantaneous. Population count, 274. The Mind Reaper had now completely withdrawn from active hunting, its psychic presence barely detectable as it huddled in the deepest part of the marshland. The psychological predator that had terrorized civilizations across the galaxy was behaving like prey, constantly scanning its environment for a threat it couldn't properly identify or counter. Your hunter appears distressed, Beth observed to the Voltani delegate. Cats have evolved alongside creatures with psychic abilities for thousands of years. Human psionics are fairly common in our population, though we don't often advertise this fact. Cats have learned to hunt in environments where their prey can read minds, predict movements, and manipulate emotions. The Shardfolk delegate's crystalline form was now chiming almost constantly, a sound like breaking glass that indicated extreme agitation. Their crystal hunter had abandoned its territorial display entirely and was attempting to phase completely out of normal reality, seeking refuge in dimensions where the strange new predator couldn't follow. The hunter wishes to withdraw from the ecosystem, the Shardfolk representative announced, their voice carrying harmonics of disbelief. It reports that remaining in the chamber poses an unacceptable risk to its survival. Beth checked her tablet as another population update arrived. Population count, 212. She looked up at the assembled delegates, many of whom were now staring at the ecosystem displays with expressions that range from fascination to horror. Cats are what we call persistence hunters. They can track prey for days or weeks, learning its habits and weaknesses. They're capable of incredible patience, waiting for hours in perfect stillness for the right moment to strike. But they're also playful, she continued, her tone becoming more serious. On Earth, cats will often injure prey without killing it immediately. They'll release it, let it run, then catch it again. This isn't cruelty in the way humans understand it. It's practice. Every hunt is training for the next hunt, preparing them to face bigger, more dangerous prey. The population counter continued its relentless countdown as Whiskers methodically worked his way through the ecosystem's inhabitants. The other apex predators had either withdrawn entirely or were huddling in defensive positions, their legendary confidence replaced by the primitive fear response that came from recognizing a superior predator. And somewhere in the vast simulation chamber, completely invisible to the most advanced sensors in the galaxy, a small orange cat continued doing what millions of years of evolution had designed him to do: hunt. The silence in the observation chamber had grown thick and oppressive as the population counter dropped below 150. Dr. Beth Williams stood calmly beside her tablet display, watching the faces of the assembled delegates as understanding slowly dawned on them. The implications of what they were witnessing went far beyond a simple demonstration of predatory ability. The Krillian ambassador's scarred face had lost its earlier arrogance. His razor wing, the terror of 17-star systems, was now perched motionless on its rocky outcropping, head low and wings folded tight against its metallic body. The proud predator that had shredded a fighter craft with casual ease was now exhibiting classic prey behavior, making itself as small and inconspicuous as possible. Population count: 141. The computer announced with mechanical indifference to the growing horror in the observation area. Beth touched her tablet screen, bringing up a new series of images that showed domestic cats in typical Earth settings. Whiskers himself appeared in several photos, sprawled across furniture, playing with toys, and sleeping in sunny windowsills. The contrast between these peaceful images and the ecological devastation unfolding in the chamber below created a cognitive dissonance that left many delegates struggling to process what they were seeing. "I think it's time for some important clarification," Beth said, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed chamber. "When your species presented their apex predators, you brought the most dangerous creatures from your homeworlds. Legends made flesh, nightmare predators that shaped your evolution and culture through millions of years of terror." She gestured toward the ecosystem display, where the population counter continued its relentless decline. "Humanity didn't bring our apex predator today. We brought our companion, our pet, our friend who sleeps on our beds and plays with our children." The Voltani delegates' elegant form had gone completely rigid, their usual fluid grace abandoned as they processed the implications. Their Mind Reaper had withdrawn so completely from the simulation that its psychic presence was barely detectable, a creature designed to feast on fear, now paralyzed by its own terror of something it couldn't understand or fight. "You're saying," the Voltani representative said, their musical voice strained to breaking, "that this creature, which is systematically destroying an ecosystem containing some of the galaxy's most dangerous predators, is a domesticated animal? A pet that shares your living spaces?" Beth nodded, pulling up census data from Earth's major population centers. "We have over 600 million cats living in human households across our planet. They share our homes, sleep in our beds, eat from bowls we fill for them, and receive medical care from our best veterinarians. We love them, and they choose to stay with us." Choose. The Shard Folk representative's crystalline form had gone almost completely dark, their usual rainbow refractions muted to pale glimmers. Their crystal hunter had achieved something previously thought impossible by phasing entirely out of the normal universe, fleeing to dimensional spaces where the strange orange predator couldn't follow. Cats were never truly domesticated, Beth explained, switching to evolutionary charts that showed the relationship between humans and felines. They entered into a partnership with humanity roughly 10,000 years ago. They chose to live with us because they recognized us as fellow apex predators worthy of alliance. The chamber erupted in horrified whispers as delegates began to understand what they were really dealing with. If cats were companions rather than conquered creatures, what did that say about the species that share their homes with such devastating predators? Population count: 89. The display screen showed brief glimpses of Whiskers as he moved through the ecosystem, no longer bothering to remain completely hidden now that the other apex predators had withdrawn from active competition. His hunting pattern had shifted from the careful stalking of unfamiliar territory to the confident patrol of claimed hunting grounds. Beth brought up a video feed from one of the ecosystem's remote sensors that had finally managed to capture a clear view of Whiskers in action. The small orange cat was crouched beside a stream, watching a creature roughly the size of a large dog approach for water. The prey animal showed no awareness of the predator's presence until Whiskers exploded into motion with a fluid grace that made cats such perfect killing machines. The attack was over in seconds. A precise leap, a single devastating bite to the neck, and the creature collapsed without even time to cry out. Whiskers released his prey and began grooming himself, cleaning his fur with the same meticulous attention he might give to removing lint from a favorite chair. The efficiency is remarkable, the ceremonial leader observed, their ancient voice heavy with implications that reached far beyond the current demonstration. Your predator shows no wasted motion, no excess aggression, no unnecessary displays of dominance. It simply kills and moves on to the next hunt. Beth nodded grimly. Cats don't kill for territory or dominance. They kill because killing is what they do. It's not emotional for them. It's not personal. It's simply their function in the ecosystem. She switched to a new display showing ecological impact studies from various Earth environments. When cats are introduced to islands or isolated ecosystems, they typically drive between 60 and 70% of small animal species to local extinction within the first decade. They don't do this intentionally. They do it because they're perfectly designed hunters operating in environments that haven't evolved defenses against their particular hunting style. Population count, 47. The Krillian ambassador found his voice, though it had lost much of its earlier authority. If these creatures are so devastating, why do you live with them? Why don't you control their numbers or restrict their activities? Beth's smile carried depths of meaning that would be analyzed by xenopsychologists for generations. Because they chose us. Because they decided that humanity was worth partnering with. And because when a perfect predator decides your family, you don't question it. You feel honored. She brought up the final display, showing cats in human households around the galaxy. Images of children playing with cats, elderly humans finding comfort in feline companionship, and cats serving as emotional support for humans in stressful occupations. The juxtaposition of these tender moments with the ongoing ecological devastation in the chamber below created a picture of humanity that defied every assumption the galaxy had made about them. We share our homes with creatures that could theoretically wipe out entire ecosystems, Beth said quietly. They trust us to provide for them, and we trust them not to view us as prey. This partnership has lasted for 10,000 years because it benefits both species. The population counter dropped below 30 as Whiskers continued his methodical hunt. The ecosystem that had been designed to challenge any apex predator was now effectively under the control of a single small cat who was treating the entire exercise as a moderately interesting afternoon's entertainment. Population count, 18. The assembled delegates sat in stunned silence, finally beginning to understand that they weren't just observing a demonstration of predatory ability. They were witnessing a revelation about humanity itself, and the implications would reshape galactic politics for centuries to come. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in record time, though calling it a session was perhaps generous. Most delegates remained in their seats from the ecosystem demonstration, too stunned to move as the implications of what they had witnessed continued to unfold in their minds. The ceremonial hall had been hastily reconfigured for formal diplomatic proceedings, but the atmosphere remained charged with the tension of species reassessing everything they thought they knew about humanity to Dr. Beth Williams sat quietly at the human delegation table, whiskers curled contentedly in her lap after a successful hunt. The small orange cat was purring softly, occasionally opening one green eye to survey the assembled aliens who were now regarding him with expressions ranging from fear to fascination to something approaching worship. His tail twitched lazily as he settled into post-hunt relaxation, completely unaware that he had just redefined humanity's place in galactic civilization. The final population count from the ecosystem simulation stood at 0. Whiskers had methodically eliminated every living creature in the chamber, including several that were designed to be unkillable by conventional predators. The advanced sensors had recorded his hunting methods in detail, documenting techniques that defied the understood principles of predator behavior. He had somehow managed to catch flying creatures, aquatic species, and even the phase-shifted entities that existed partially outside normal reality. The Krillian ambassador was the first to break the stunned silence. His scarred face showed none of its earlier arrogance, as he leaned forward with obvious effort. His missing arm, lost to his own species' violent culture, seemed suddenly insignificant compared to the implications of living alongside perfect predators by choice. "Honored human delegate," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "we require immediate clarification about your species' domestication protocols. The Krillian Empire has 17 star systems under our protection. If your predator companions pose a threat to these populations, we must implement appropriate safeguards." Beth scratched behind Whisker's ears, eliciting a louder purr that somehow seemed to echo in the vast chamber. Cats are generally content to stay with their chosen families. They don't require conquering territories or demonstrating dominance over other species. As long as they're fed, loved, and given appropriate enrichment activities, they're quite peaceful. The Shard folk representative, their crystalline form still dim with shock, spoke in harmonics that sounded like whined through shattered glass. Appropriate enrichment activities? What constitutes entertainment for such a creature? Beth pulled out her tablet and showed a video of Whiskers playing with a simple feather toy, pouncing and batting at it with intense focus. The contrast between this playful behavior and the systematic ecosystem destruction they had just witnessed created another layer of cognitive dissonance for the assembled delegates. Cats enjoy hunting games, comfortable sleeping spots, and interactive play with their families, she explained. They also appreciate having access to sunny windows, varied textures to explore, and occasional treats. Most cats spend 16 to 20 hours per day sleeping. The Voltani delegate had abandoned their meditation pose entirely, sitting forward with visible agitation. Their Mind Reaper had not yet returned to the chamber, still hiding in whatever psychic refuge it had found during the demonstration. Your species shares living spaces with these creatures while they sleep 20 hours per day? How do you maintain security protocols? We don't need security protocols, Beth said simply. Cats choose their families and defend them. Any threat to a cat's chosen humans becomes a threat to the cat. There are documented cases of cats fighting off predators many times their size to protect human children. She switched to a news article about a cat who had saved a toddler from a dog attack, then to another showing a cat who had alerted a family to a fire in their home. They're not just predators living in our homes. They're family members who take the protection of their humans very seriously. The ceremonial leader, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights like scattered stars, spoke with the weight of millennia behind their words. In all our recorded history, no species has successfully domesticated their apex predators. Most civilizations spend their development period either fleeing from such creatures or driving them to extinction. The concept of voluntary partnership is unprecedented. Beth nodded thoughtfully. Humans have several predator partnerships. We've worked with wolves for over 30,000 years, developing them into dozens of specialized working breeds. We have hunting partnerships with various bird species, marine mammals who choose to assist with fishing, and even some reptile species that help with pest control. The assembled delegates exchanged glances that spoke of rapid diplomatic calculations and hastily revised threat assessments. The revelation that humanity maintained multiple partnerships with apex predators painted a picture of a species that was either incredibly brave or incredibly dangerous. Possibly both. The Voltani Collective requests permission to establish a formal cultural exchange program, the Voltani representative announced, their musical voice carrying undertones of barely controlled panic. We wish to study these partnership protocols extensively before any future encounters with human settlements. Similar requests began flowing from delegations around the chamber. The Shard folk wanted to examine the dimensional implications of human-predator bonding. The Krillian Empire formally requested detailed reports on human military capabilities, clearly concerned about a species that could field armies accompanied by perfect hunters. Smaller civilizations began proposing trade agreements that positioned humanity as protector species for their colonies. Beth listened to the flood of diplomatic overtures with quiet satisfaction. Humanity's position in galactic politics had shifted from minor species to major power in the span of a single afternoon, all because Whiskers had done what came naturally to him. The ceremonial leader called for formal order as the session threatened to dissolve into chaos. The Galactic Council hereby recognizes humanity as an apex partnership species, the first such designation in our records. This status grants full voting rights, territorial expansion privileges, and diplomatic immunity for all registered companion predators. They paused, looking directly at Whiskers, who chose that moment to stretch and resettle in Beth's lap with a soft chirp of contentment. Additionally, the Council formally requests that the human representative Whiskers be granted diplomatic credentials and appropriate honors for his demonstration of interspecies cooperation. Beth smiled and looked down at her orange companion, who was now grooming his paw with the concentrated attention that cats brought to all important tasks. I think he'd be honored to accept, as long as the diplomatic residence includes sunny windows and comfortable chairs. The session concluded with Whiskers officially becoming the first feline ambassador in galactic history, a position he celebrated by taking a nap on the ceremonial papers while Beth filled out the necessary forms. The galaxy would never look at either cats or humans the same way again, and diplomatic protocols would forever include provisions for species who chose to share their homes with perfect predators, as the delegates filed out of the chamber, many casting nervous glances toward the sleeping orange diplomat. Beth reflected on how a simple pet carrier and one ordinary housecat had just reshaped the political structure of known space. Whiskers opened one green eye, purred softly, and went back to sleep, completely content with his role as humanity's most effective ambassador.